allowing the Ukrainians to use Western weapons to attack targets within Russia. What do you think? Where is the red line of Vladimir Putin?
Well, the red line is a strategic threat. And President Putin was very explicit about that last week. He said, if we have long-range missiles striking in the inside of Russia, that means Western space surveillance, Western programming of these missiles. That means that that's an attack by the United States, essentially, on Russia. If it's Ukrainians sending in drones, we don't like it and we're going to hit back. But if it's the United States using its space technology, its advanced digital technologies, attacking missiles or Taurus missiles, it's all the same, basically. This is Western alliance technology that is strategic, that threatens a first strike attack, nuclear attack. That's a red line for us. President Putin wasn't even vague about that and spelled it out quite explicitly, quite formally. If you need programming from satellites, if you try to take out our early warning systems, which, there were 2 attacks against Russian radar that are explicitly.
They tried it.
Yes. Now, I think the key for the West, so-called, and the West is, just a very small group of people. We don't mean the public, but the thing for the public to understand, and for the West to understand, if you will, and for our leaders to understand, the Ukrainian leaders will have no self-control at all. For them, hit anywhere, raise it to World War III, for them, that makes sense. That's true of the Baltic states also. It's not really true, but that's how these leaders think. Raise any level of rhetoric, be as obnoxious as possible. Say Russia, to hear the Estonian leaders say Russia should become smaller states, or Latvian leader, Russia must be defeated. Are you kidding? These are coming. But why are they saying that? Because they want to draw the U.S. into a larger conflict, defeat Russia. This is completely reckless. And the point is, these countries don't have any self-control. It's like Israel, too. They will never self-limit because they think they can provoke the United States into backing them with a full nuclear arsenal. But this is a kind of insanity. And this is why the job of the U.S. president is so essential. The job of a U.S. president is to put a foot on the brakes. That's the job.
And is the situation more dangerous than in 1962 in the Cuban Missile Crisis right now?
It is approaching comparability. I would say during that crisis, that was the height that we've ever had of nuclear risk. People don't know the story by and large, but even after Kennedy and Khrushchev had negotiated, and this is very important, negotiated a peaceful outcome that saved the world, a disabled nuclear sub almost launched a nuclear-tipped torpedo that would have led to nuclear war, even without the leaders of the 2 countries provoking it or approving it. You see, we live in a world where there are field forces, there are field commanders, there are generals, there are hotheads, there are all sorts of people in this world, and we need to stay far away from the red lines of the others. This is the main point. This is the perfect vocation for Ukraine. Be neutral. Stay safe, be neutral, and keep the US and Russia apart from each other. Of course, the United States hates the idea of neutrality. This is the basic problem. The US says you're either with us or you're against us. The whole idea of neutrality is against the US doctrine.
But how you explain the behavior of the Europeans? I'm talking to a lot of politicians, former politicians and they are crazed. They say they can't believe it. I mean, because Europe will be the battlefield of this confrontation. Europe, which has been destroyed twice in the last century, you can say, so to say, first politically and then really after the Second World War. We don't have to get into that. How do you explain the behavior of the European powers, France, Germany, Brussels? I mean, they're totally in line with this American foreign policy. What's happening in Europe?
It's so interesting. First of all, when Tucker Carlson had his interview with Putin, President Putin says, I can't understand the Germans. Okay, if he can't understand the Germans, who can understand the Germans in this case? There is a mystery to this that is not me alone. Now, when I say in discussions that I'm a bit mystified by the European lack of intelligent discussion, debate, understanding, and being led by what I know to be a reckless and ignorant U.S. foreign policy, then I get a lot of mail, and I got one this morning from an academic in Europe who said, Mr. Sachs, I'm telling you, I grew up in the university system in Europe. You could not say a word against the U.S. There's no open discussion. And so don't expect anything from here. Then I hear from others who say, Mr. Sachs, you're very naive. There's a lot of big bucks from the U.S., from the military industrial complex. Or why do you think the U.S. has its military bases in Europe? We're still basically occupied countries. So people offer lots of theories that basically come to the fact that the U.S. has a lot of control. I think there's one thing that we should understand. Of course, I don't understand it fully because by design it's hidden, but the intelligence services play a huge role in foreign policy, huge. The CIA is not an intelligence agency. It is probably the most important foreign policy institution in the United States. It's both an army, it's a foreign policy maker, and so on. When Congress comes to vote for more aid for Ukraine, it's the CIA director that, quote, explains the facts to the Speaker of the House. When you look at a meeting in the Situation Room in the White House, as there was a recent meeting, you see Burns talking. He's the CIA director talking, and the President of the United States listening. I don't think it's an accident. When Israel and Hamas are supposed to be negotiating over a ceasefire and hostage release, who goes from the U.S.? Not Blinken, but Burns, the CIA. Who is most influential in Germany in foreign policy? Is it BND? Is it the secret services? In Britain, isn't it MI6 that plays a huge role? We know that there was, after World War II, a network set up among these intelligence services that included private armies or armies basically of the leadership outside of parliamentary control. I don't want to go way overboard except to say that a lot of foreign policy is secretively conducted. Very little is transparent. I know about the U.S. scene much more than I do about Europe. But I believe that part of the issue here is that there is a hidden foreign policy that accompanies the public foreign policy.
And there is another problem, just listening to you. I mean, this is the revenge, you can say, of the total neglect of the armed forces within Europe. I mean, many politicians start to realize that they don't have anything. They always depended on the United States, that they will send the cavalry if the heat goes up. And now they have nothing in their hand. So they're totally powerless. And it's really interesting that within the last 20 years, the sovereignty of Europe has declined immensely. If you think
That's
back
exactly right.
to the Iraq War at that
But
time, Gerhard Schröder, Germany, and Chirac, they still had the guts and the spine to say, no, we don't participate. Now, totally gone.
But this is so true and so strange. I mean, van der Leyen is like a U.S. employee. She wouldn't utter a word. A word. I know it. I've seen some of this inside. It's amazing. It's like a wholly owned subsidiary of the United States. Interestingly, I agree completely with Macron that Europe needs strategic autonomy.
But now he does the opposite.
But then he does so reckless. It's just unbelievable, the improvisation.
But I had a discussion with some people who were at the time involved in the Nord Stream, the buildup of the Nord Stream pipelines in Germany, politicians, ambassadors. And there is one thing I would be curious, what's your opinion? I mean, if you look from the national interest of the United States, after the Second World War. I mean, they have fought the Second World War. They have been here. They have their troops here. They have their embassies here. And now they start to see that Germany is drifting towards Russia. There was this huge honeymoon in 2000, 2008, 2010, Putin and Schröder, close friends. You had the energy lines. And I started to think about the United States. How do they see this? That Germany, this hot bride, this rich bride is drifting to the east. And then it's, geopolitical ice cold interest. The Americans don't want Russia and Germany together because it's not in their interest. They don't want Europe slip under the control, you can say, of Russia. Yeah. So isn't there a certain rationality on the side of the American aggressiveness in that sense?
I think that this is exactly right, that the idea of Germany and Russia close together is against U.S. foreign policy as perceived by the security state. And it's very interesting. I was an advisor to Gorbachev and an advisor to Yeltsin. And my view was that and of course, as an advisor, I wanted to see a strong economy of the Soviet Union and a strong economy of Russia, just like I like a strong economy of China, because I'm not an us versus them mentality. I want people to have decent lives. Mm-hmm. Now, my own thought, very vividly, I can remember back to 1991, 92, was the Soviet Union had been cut out of Western technology, of course, for decades. That was the whole containment policy and so on. But I thought, well, the real opportunity here is, of course, Germany and Russia joining forces to help rebuild a lot of the industrial base. You have great scientists, engineers in Russia. This is wonderful. That's what I wanted, very explicitly. That's the natural way that this economic region would work. Excellent. Putting a border is completely contrary to economic interests, geopolitical, well, not geopolitical, but to safety, to peace. But that's what the U.S. idea is. So it comes back to the mystery. How does Germany let itself be so suborned in this? Because Germany wasn't looking to connect with Russia to take over the world. It was looking for a natural economic relations.
But
we call it the gravity model, by the way, in economics, that you trade with your neighbors.
And who is the American politician who would accept this, you could say, natural development? Because you can argue Europe was, except in the Second World War, at the beginning of the Second World War, Europe was always well off when Germany and Russia went along and had a good cooperation. In 1939, it was not the case when Hitler and Stalin made this contract, of course, which is a huge drama. But are there American politicians who would accept that Germany and Russia and Europe and Russia had better relationship, not dominated by the United States, but, just like, as you described it, are there politicians in the United States who would accept that, or is this
No.
totally against
No,
everything?
it's not even an issue of discussion or discourse, because
No.
the U.S., understand, is very narrow-minded. It was flattered in 1941 when Henry Luce, the publisher of Time, said, "This is the American century."
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Americans loved that phrase. This is our turn to lead the world. And we're essentially still in that mindset. And so American doctrine, grand strategy, if you want to use that phrase, is full spectrum dominance of the United States in every region of the world, including Europe, of course. And a close German-Russian economic cooperation is against that, actually. And so Nord Stream was the great bugbear of American politics all through the 2010s. When it was destroyed, it was the most predicted event imaginable, because the U.S. had said for a decade, "We'll never let it happen. We'll never let it happen. We'll never let it happen." So what you're saying is absolutely correct. But we don't even rise to that level of sophistication in American politics to be aware explicitly that that's a debatable issue, because the only debatable issue is full spectrum dominance of the United States.